Uh, My name is Mark Whitworth. I'm the president of the board of directors of Energize Vermont, and I want to thank the committee for hearing my testimony today. This morning I'd like to tell you about Energize Vermont's climate action project. I'd like to discuss provisions of the bill under consideration that we support, describe some of our concerns with it, and offer suggestions about how those concerns might be addressed. And let's see it. If you go to slide 3, Energize Vermont's mission is to promote sensible energy and climate policies for Vermont, policies that protect our environment and show respect for our communities. We're a volunteer organization with no paid staff. We're supported by our members who have ties to Vermont and who care about our future. We accept no corporate contributions. And slide 4. In January, we launched our 5-step Vermont climate action project. And we launched it because the discussion about climate change in Vermont has become polarized and one-dimensional. It's focused only upon emissions reductions through a massive build-out of wind and solar energy. People who express concerns about the social or environmental impacts of this build-out have been dismissed as climate change deniers. At Energize Vermont, we're not deniers. We regard climate change as our greatest challenge. Lowering emissions is an important element in our response, but it can't be the only element. So protecting our natural resources is the most important climate action that Vermonters can take. Our mountains, forests, waters, and agricultural soils, these are our natural defenses against climate impacts. Impacts like extinctions, food and water insecurity, and severe weather events. That's the first step in a sensible climate action program. Our second step is to build strong, resilient communities. Strong communities with high levels of civic engagement can come together to meet the gravest of challenges. Step 3, change the way we use energy. This includes fuel switching, moving to energy-efficient vehicles and appliances, and perhaps most importantly, weatherizing our homes and businesses. And finally, step 4, change the way we produce energy. This is where we put solar panels and pellet mills. And finally, consider the climate impacts of our lifestyle choices. This includes our shopping habits, what we eat and where it comes from, where we vacation, and how we get there. Our step 5 is about excess and waste. The UN says that 30% of the food that we produce, we waste. And that wasted food is responsible for 8% of our global greenhouse gas emissions. So, slide 5. Energize Vermont supports strengthening Act 250 as an effective response to climate change. While the provisions that encourage energy-wise planning are important, in our view, the most important aspects of Act 250 will continue to be the protection of our natural resources. The slide 6. The particular provisions in the current bill that Energize Vermont supports are those that address climate change, promote climate adaptation for both wildlife and our communities. And are we on the air? We are on the air. And the provisions that enable us to reduce emissions. We want to protect forest blocks and connecting habitat. We support the reduction of elevations for threshold of Act 250 jurisdictions. We favor repealing exemptions to Act 250 jurisdiction. Slide 7. We have some concerns about aspects of the bill that may run counter to the goals that we do support. we're concerned about mitigating environmental degradation through cash payments. It makes it seem like our vital ecological assets are for sale. And if they're for sale, it's just a matter of time before someone buys them. Land swaps as a mitigation tool almost always result in the degradation of valuable land in exchange for the protection of lower valued land. We need look only as far as Lowell and Deerfield to see that. Deerfield is particularly egregious, and I know that my friend Annette Smith addressed that in her testimony here last week. Deerfield, at Deerfield, we gave away our premier bear habitat. It might have been deer habitat too, but mostly bears. And we traded it for a 17th round draft pick and a player to be named later. We still don't know what land is going to be preserved in exchange for that bear habitat. And we see nothing that helps us deal with cumulative impacts, another name for death by 1,000 cuts. And finally, even as we strengthen Act 250, energy projects are not under Act 250 jurisdiction. Energy development is degrading our environment far beyond its ability to impact atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases. Take a look at the turbines on Lowell Mountain. Green Mountain Power claims that those turbines avoid the emission of 75,000 tons of carbon dioxide each year. Sound like a lot? Well, that's the amount of carbon dioxide produced by metropolitan New York traffic in less than half a day. And for that, we blew the top off a mountain and paved it. We allowed Green Mountain Power. What's that?
Can you just repeat that statistic?
Green Mountain Power says that they avoid the emission of 75,000 tons of greenhouse gases per year, carbon per year. That's the amount of carbon emitted by New York City traffic in, I think it's 10 hours. Pretty good trade.
I do.
We have a question from Representative Bates.
Can you give me some information on that, what you just said about the emissions and everything, and where you got that information from?
I calculated.
Because I'm just going by what you said.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're telling me the truth or not.
I will follow up with all of you and provide you with my arithmetic.
Okay. Because it's really hard to follow you when you're just saying what you believe.
Well, this is arithmetic. You may find fault with it, and if you do, I'd like to know. But this is based on Department of Transportation information about the vehicle miles traveled in the metro New York area.
I thought we were just talking about windmills.
What's that?
So
Forget
he's making a comparison. Everyone's in the witness chairs telling us what they
I get it. I'm good. Thank you.
No,
I just need the information.
What I'm doing is I'm comparing New York City traffic to the emission savings in Lowell.
And I'm just trying to ask where the information is.
The information about Lowell's 75,000, the avoidance of greenhouse gases comes from Green Mountain Power. And in fact, you just received a fact sheet from Green Mountain Power that includes that statistic. They don't include the equivalence of New York City traffic.
Okay.
But I'll follow up with you on that, because I think it's important for us to understand this.
Okay.
So, slide 8. Let's talk about the Staying Connected initiative. And I want to use it to illustrate the importance of cumulative impacts of development. Staying Connected is an international collaboration whose aim is to conserve, restore, and enhance landscape connectivity. This is a map of part of the Staying Connected linkage that's in Vermont. It's landscape connectivity that will enable wildlife to travel and adapt to a changing climate. And there's no question that the climate is changing. If we close off those connecting linkages, then we are ensuring that species cannot travel, cannot adapt, and cannot survive. The critical lands identified by the Staying Connected initiative are the very same lands that our own Agency of Natural Resources have designated as Vermont's highest priority forest blocks. Right now, Act 250 doesn't protect those forest blocks. That's because energy projects are not regulated by Act 250. And a lot of energy developers seem to want to go right for our forests. Look at the,
Representative McCullough has a question.
So then, you made a statement that right now, energy projects are not overseen. That wasn't sure by Act 250.
they're not under the jurisdiction.
Thank you. Under that jurisdiction of Act 250. So then, are you recommending they should be?
I will.
Okay, good. Thank you. Pardon me for jumping the gun on that.
That's okay.
Yep.
It's a good segue. You know, I'll give you your $20. Oh, we can't buy it.
That's
There's no $20. I want to point out this choke point in the Staying Connected linkage. This is where Orleans, Essex, and Caledonia County meet, and the towns of Newark and Brighton have a lot of their land is in this choke point. Right now we have wind installations in Sheffield and Lowell, which are already narrowing this linkage. There were other projects that were wind projects that were proposed for Newark, Brighton, Ferdinand, and East Haven that would have pretty much closed that off.
Representative Lefebvre.
Who defined the choke points that are shown on the map?
This map, the green on this map is the extent of the Staying Connected initiative's linkage, the vital forest habitat that they've identified. By coincidence, and it's not coincidence, those are the same highest priority forest blocks that our Agency of Natural Resources has identified.
So do you know that, is one derived from the other?
I expect that since A&R personnel are involved in Staying Connected, that they helped identify those lands.
You have a question? Representative Odie.
I'm wondering, is that no forest in Westmore or?
No, there's forest there, but it isn't identified as highest priority forest blocks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going.
No, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I know Westmore's got a mountain in it with lots and lots of woods anyway on it.
It is green, Westmore.
yeah. This is Westmore here. That's Willoughby Lake that you can see, and the mountains that you may be talking about are right here and here, and the skiing over here is very good if you're into that kind of thing. The point is that each of these wind projects is considered independently of the other, but the cumulative effect of all of them is devastating. So I hope that the bill that you eventually pass will protect areas like that, and that we never have to worry about cumulative impacts of closing off a linkage as important as this one. So our recommendations for the current bill are to eliminate cash payments as a mitigation, to amend land swapping mitigation practices to ensure that the lands that are protected are the most highly valued lands, not consolation prizes. And finally, we'd like to see energy siting moved from Section 248 to Act 250. Now, I know that over the summer, the commission couldn't come to that conclusion, but maybe you can. By the way, I participated in the information session that the commission conducted in Island Pond, which was very heavily attended. There were two large groups of people there. There were people who were concerned about the environmental destruction brought about by these huge energy projects, and the other group of people, which was somewhat larger, were the snowmobilers. And normally what we encounter in those information gathering sessions is 3 hours of 1.5-minute talks that are very repetitive. But the way that was structured, the listening session was structured, was innovative, and I thought very effective. It managed to, facilitated discussions managed to find common ground between the people who were concerned about energy development and the snowmobilers. And everybody agreed that both of those groups agreed that the most important thing that Act 250 could do would be to continue to protect our intact ecosystems. So if the members of this committee were involved in arranging that, that was a good job.
Thank you, that was the intention, was to have some good conversations.
Well, I'm sure that you've been through many hearings that,
Yes.
40 people get up and say the same thing. And maybe it's not useless.
Representative Bates.
I have to go back one little bit. Can you explain to me the land swap? I'm not quite, I do not understand it, and I don't know who approves it, so if you could just give me a simple explanation, if you can.
Okay, in the Deerfield Wind Project, it was that land that those turbines were built on was considered to be the best bear habitat in the state. They wanted to disrupt it, so they agreed that they would.
Who agreed?
The state regulators and the wind developers agreed that they would set aside some land someplace else for conservation in order to make up for this degradation of bear habitat that they needed to carry off in order to build their energy installation.
So the state regulators, who's that?
That would be the Public Utility Commission, with some input from the Agency of Natural Resources and the wind developer.
Representative McCullough.
Thank you.
So, Mark, I'm thinking it would be useful for our committee to actually go back a step or two from there and say, what is mitigation? How is it arrived at? And why has it been felt to be needed? How is it arrived at in the permitting process? And then that's all a precursor to what just happened at Deerfield. Would you go back to what is mitigation and why it was thought to be a good idea? Not that it necessarily is.
Well, mitigation is through a land swap, is the practice of saying, well, I'm going to degrade this environment here, and so that you don't feel bad about it, I'm going to protect this land over here.
And that's usually because there are no options for you on that site to mitigate on that site.
That's right. And the current bill, I think, tweaks those provisions a bit and also discusses paying cash to mitigate. In our view, paying cash is putting our most valuable resources up for sale. And land swaps represent kind of a race to the bottom, where I'm going to trade you this crappy land for this good land that I'm going to deface.
Representative Morgan has a question.
He just answered the question. It's
Okay.
not always one for one. It's sometimes prime land for a piece of junk that nobody wants anyway.
Yeah, so, I hope that you can find a way to ensure that the land that's set aside is more valuable than the land that's being degraded. So, what would it look if Act 250 had jurisdiction over energy projects? First of all, we're not arguing for technical issues like rates, grid impacts, economic benefit, and balancing supply and demand. We're not advocating that those be placed under Act 250. Those aspects of energy regulation would still remain the responsibility of the Public Utility Commission. That's what they're good at. They've been doing that for years and years. But the PUC is not particularly good at land use regulation. That's what Act 250 is for. The energy projects that are being proposed in Vermont today are land intensive. It's not like it used to be, where you put up a gas-fired plant or God forbid, a coal plant that has a very limited footprint. These are enormous undertakings that occupy an awful lot of land and require the degradation of an awful lot of land. We need land use questions of that magnitude to be considered by our foremost experts, and those are the people that administer Act 250. We can place the most effective land use provisions in the current bill to strengthen Act 250. And it might not even matter, because energy projects are exempt from it. So that's all I have to say. I want to thank you for your attentiveness.
We have a couple more questions for you. Representative Hootie, and Lefebvre.
I thought it was fine until you said, because it might not even matter, energy products are exempt. Energy siting under Act 250 would not be exempt.
That's right. So I hope you will.
Ah, all right.
All right, Representative Dolan.
Good morning. There's a provision in Act 250 called the Capability Development Plan, and we took testimony this week on the value of that plan and how this opportunity to revisit and modernize Act 250 enables us to really look at this planning process to be able to better articulate all questions related to existing physical and infrastructure conditions of that landscape, so that we can be smarter at how we plan for different types of build-out. Would you, I imagine you would see that as a good thing.
Yeah.
If you could, because not only is it,
You want to go back?
not only is it if you're bringing in the criteria, but you're bringing in this kind of value of having this capability development plan that may not exist in the 250. Is that accurate to say? Like, there's nothing like that in 248 that allows you to kind of really.
Well, I don't think that the provisions that, new provisions that you introduce into Act 250 automatically get carried over into Section 248. Yeah, I think the real point is that Section 248 is administered by the Public Utility Commission in Montpelier. Not that there's anything wrong with Montpelier, but the Act 250 commissions are distributed throughout the state. They are attuned to local conditions, local sensibilities, and I think that they can do a better job in protecting our natural resources.
Well, we have a couple before you, Representative Koa. So Representative Dolan I mean, Odie, did you ask first, Karen?
Yes.
Okay. We're a little fave.
Thank you,
Excuse
thank
me.
you, yes.
LMNO, I'm getting
Well, Mark and I are from the same little town, so we know one another. But what I wanted to bring out in a way is the fourth bullet point on talking about Act 250 commissioners are attuned to local sensibilities. They, quote, know a clear written community standard. And I'm wondering if you had experienced to the contrary as far as having the PUC recognize community standards.
Yeah. The Public Utility Commission process under Section 248 is highly technical, highly legalistic. I have seen the Public Utility Commission dismiss things that are included in town plans and regional plans because they don't express their ideas in the right sequence of the right magic words. I think that the Act 250 commissions are much better at interpreting regional plans and municipal plans than the PUC is.
Have you had experience putting together town or regional plans?
Yes, I'm on both. I'm on the board of the NVDA, which is our regional planning commission in the Northeast Kingdom, and I'm on the planning commission in my town and your town, which is Newark, which is the heart of the kingdom. By the way, there are 2 towns in the kingdom that touch all three counties, and Newark is one of them, and I bet you can name the other one.
I'll let you do it.
That's right. Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Representative McCullough.
So, Mark, I have tasked a VCE and would like you to join them in making some written, perhaps, language that we might use regarding the no mitigation. I believe we need to look at that very seriously, and having experts help us do that would be very important.
We'd be delighted to do that.
Cumulative impacts. Where would you? I would think that with language and if we were to include it with about cumulative impacts, would end up being in one of the criteria. And where would you which criteria? And if that doesn't fit you at the moment, please get back.
Okay, why don't we do that, so I
Yep.
have some time to consider that.
Yep. And obviously everything else you presented has been carefully considered, and we'd like that implicated to be as well. And finally, how would you parse out the Act 250 role and the PUC's role in energy siting? You might, if you would, produce some language around that. Because it's very clear to me that Act 250 cannot just take energy siting away from PUC for what you said today. I mean, the highly technical nature of electrons and how they're distributed and so on. It was beyond belief that when Lowell got built, then it had to shut down because we didn't have the wires to transport the electrons. PUC even missed that somehow, or Green Mountain Power missed it, or it was chosen to be ignored. I have no idea the politics of the
And by the way, it's happening again. There is a turbine project being proposed for Holland, Vermont, which will interfere or saturate our electricity carrying capacity for the Holland project, for the Sheffield project, and the Lowell project. we're building projects that can't operate. You know, we're wasting everything.
The cumulative, so if you could give us direction on parsing those two processes out, I'd appreciate it. And I want to go back momentarily to cumulative impacts. Maybe we need separate spots for that, or maybe it's a general statement. Cumulative impacts certainly in the energy development, but also in cumulative impacts of development in general, and all the development really needs under Act 250. Project A, B, and C, no problem. We want to build project D, or D is next. And suddenly, we've gone beyond the tipping point, and we need to better understand that, not just charge the developer a bunch of money to build 2 more lanes in the highway or what have you. So I'd appreciate
Sure,
both of those levels.
I'd be delighted to.
And that information, if you would, send to Laura for distribution to the committee. I'm saying, is that yes?
Yes, that's great. So I'm curious if your group is watching or monitoring other fragmented development types, like are you concerned with long driveways or, I don't know, ski areas or other types of development that happen in similar locations?
Well, that's true, but our mission is focused mostly on energy development. So personally, I'm concerned about all of those things. And in my role as a planning commissioner in my town and as a active participant in plan development in the Northeast Kingdom, I'm very concerned about those things.
So one of the things we're considering in this review is looking at reinstating the road rule from it to Act 250, which was previously set at 800 feet. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I'm not familiar with
Okay. Thank you for coming in. Any other last questions for Mr. Whitworth? Okay.
that. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
By the way, I do want to point out that the Moose family here,
Unbelievable picture.
yeah, that's a great picture by a fellow named Roger Irwin.
Do you know when that was taken?
I don't. I'll find out. I'll let you know. I think it was taken in the Maidstone area.
We have a little bear family over there on the wall. Is that what you're going to say, Representative Morgan?
No, I was going to say, I used to be in the house with Mr. Irwin from Maidstone, and that might be his.
That is his. That is the
Oh,
Mr.
get it?
Irwin from Maidstone.
Yeah. I didn't even see Papa there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's photobombing the
Cameo.
yeah.
Keeping an eye out.
Great. Thank you very
Very
much.
good. Thank you.